Discovery doesn't discover anymore. Our arts and entertainment, only A&E, isn't about arts and entertainment. Even the History Channel, you can turn it on and there's, you know, ice road truckers. I live in public television. I suppose some folks can say, oh, it's too much this, and on the left can say it's too much that.
You mean the perception of PBS?
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, can I just say, when people say, oh, it's lefty, Bill Buckley was on PBS for 35 years. We end up producing the best children's, the best science, the best nature, the best public affairs. Some people think the best drama, and some people say the best history on the dial, which isn't bad, particularly when the rest of that marketplace in places like Discovery doesn't discover anymore. Our arts and entertainment, only A&E, isn't about arts and entertainment. There's a kind of sameness. Even the History Channel, you can turn it on and there's, you know, ice road truckers. When the Civil War came out, critics said no one's going to watch it. Stephen Bochco has a new singing cop rock thing, and nobody's going to watch it. It's really good, Ken, but I just want to warn you, nobody's going to watch it.
A VCR, one for you and me. They got a water fountain in the John.
And then baseball, 4 years later, they said, you know, we live in an MTV world. Nobody's going to go 18.5 hours. And while I would not suggest that PBS has anything to do with the defense of the country, its presence just makes the country worth defending.
Your speech at Stanford.
Yeah.
Does that change how people are going to see you?
For 216 years, our elections, though bitterly contested, have featured the philosophies and characters of candidates who were clearly qualified. That is not the case this year. One is glaringly not qualified.
I hope not. You know, I've got my day job, and I consciously got underwriters. You know, in public television, we're funded by grantors. People from the far, far right, contributors, people from the left, bundlers for the president, and everybody in between.
But I have to imagine you got some blowback from the Stanford speech, and people who said, I've been a big fan of your work until now.
I wasn't speaking as the person who makes films. I'm speaking as a citizen who knows about history. But in this case, I felt it was time. There was a circumstance where I felt the person running for president was so unqualified.
So there's no historical antecedent in this country?
In the history, there are antecedents other places which you don't really want to contemplate and just say.
You barely even say his name.
I don't say his name. And it was important for me not to do that, to just speak to what I felt was a historical moment and my obligation as a citizen, not as a filmmaker, not as an amateur historian, but as a citizen to say, I don't think this is right. Can we stop?
Can you imagine doing a project about you would probably argue darker elements of the country that are now being unearthed? Would you do a doc on the alt-right? Something like that?
Sure. I've already done that doc. It's called Prohibition, right?
Sure.
About single-issue political campaigns that metastasize with horrible unintended consequences. The demonization of recent immigrant groups to the United States. Smear campaigns during presidential election cycle. And a whole group of people who feel like they've lost control of their country and want to take it back.
Is there any outfit who could give you so large a check it would change your worldview? I mean, what would Ken Burns do with a $40 million budget?
You know, it's funny. I don't know. I don't think that will happen. I like being the suit behind my film. That is to say, nobody with the suit comes in and says, longer, shorter, sexier, less sexy, more violent, less violent. So the Civil War originally was supposed to be 5 1-hours of still photographs. Well, it's almost 12 hours of still photographs.
More than 3 million Americans fought in it, and over 600,000 men, 2% of the population, died in it.
When I say that, they go, oh, nobody's going to look for, you know, more than an hour at still photographs. Well, as we know, it's still the highest rated program in PBS history. And baseball, oh, that would be great. You know, how long, 2 hours? Well, it's going to be 18.5 hours.
You mentioned golden age of documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
Making a Murderer, Wiener, The Jinx.
The Jinx.
When you see these, do you feel they're furthering the craft?
Absolutely. And so, I felt that we had entered into a golden age in the mid-'80s. And all that's happened is it's gotten better. We've been aware that there's only a handful of plots. Somebody once said there are only 8 plots in the world. And TV, by the time you get to Rocky 87 and Batman 43, you kind of get what it is. And we, in the documentary world, are obliged to tell stories with the same laws that Steven Spielberg or someone else has to, but we can't make stuff up. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not to take away from Tom Hanks playing Sully in Clint Eastwood's new film, which is fantastic, or Casey Affleck in Manchester by the Sea, Oscar-worthy
Deepwater Horizon,
thing.
Snowden, all these films trying to embrace reality.
Oh, exactly right.
Is a Ken Burns doc bingeable? Which one?
I think the long ones, all of them are. Civil War, baseball, jazz, the war, national parks, and the Roosevelts, and upcoming Vietnam. Very much so.
Is that how you envision audiences watching it when you're cutting it?
No, I was really surprised. The first hint I got is that Barry Diller told me that he'd watched the entire Civil War on his airplane in one big flight. And I went, wow, who had, And that was, 26 years ago, and I thought, that's unusual. We designed it so that you could take a break, you could exhale. So yeah, binge watching is an interesting thing, and I think it's us trying to control our own environment. It might be Downton Abbey, it might be Steven Spielberg, it might be Clint Eastwood. We loved Star Wars, the original Star Wars, because it was a fanciful future, but also one that was gritty and dirty, and things broke down and you had to kick the Millennium Falcon a couple of times, and that, reminded us. It felt like, there was the toaster was going to get this thing going.
Sure.
That meant something. Or Blade Runner. You always felt that while it was a dystopian world, there was something familiar too. 2
science fiction references.
Yeah.
There must be a few, I can think of 4 or 5, specific moments in film history. I'm talking movies.
Yeah.
That are with me all the time.
Well, I have 10,000 of those.
Sure.
It's Buster Keaton twiddly winking the railroad tie off the tracks in The General. It's a moment in Last Tango in Paris. It's the deep focus in Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. It's my favorite film, The Seventh Samurai, the pouring rain and the hoof beats of the thieves as the samurais are trying to protect this town.
The Ken Burns effect.
Okay.
What does it mean that it's named after you?
Well, Steve Jobs called me up in December of 2002 and he said, would you come and visit me? And that was me knocking at the door the next moment. And he said that they'd been working on this thing. They were perfecting this sort of abbreviated, superficial version of what I do with old photographs. And I said, oh, that's cool. He said, every Mac computer in January 2003 is going to have it from now on in. We want to call it the Ken Burns effect. And I said, I don't do commercial endorsements. And he looked at me, and it was really a great moment. He says, come on. I said, no, I don't do commercial endorsements. And he said, come with me. We went back to his office. And when I left, I took from him a promise to give several $100,000 in software and hardware, which I gave away to nonprofits, in exchange for keeping the name. And the world is divided between people who've said, you idiot, you should have asked him, for a fraction of a cent every time it was used. I said, oh, he would have then called it the pan and zoom effect.
How did that relationship evolve later?
It developed because we had a curiosity about each other. He was absolutely certain that for a while that my deal with PBS was somehow terrible and I should be someplace else. And he had his lawyer, it talked to my lawyer, and he said, no, I think you've got a good deal. I think you've got this nice niche and you're protected. Yeah, I really had a great admiration for him. It's funny, in the films about him that have come out, I don't recognize him.
You mean this sort of guerrilla marketing, competitive zeal?
I've seen the documentary that's very critical of him, and I've seen the Aaron Sorkin Boyle film that is good, but it doesn't bear resemblance to the person that I know.
Hey CNBC fans, I'm Carl Quintanilla. Thanks for watching CNBC's Binge on YouTube. You can subscribe by clicking right here. Watch all of our interviews on the changing media landscape. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch more from CNBC. Thanks for watching.